Welcome to The Future of Less Work, the podcast that's uncovering how work is changing one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today, in this very first episode, we're going to do this the other way around. With me will be Eran Stern, and he has agreed to interview me about this podcast, about the future of work, and about why we're kicking off this series. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Eran. Thank you for hosting the first episode of The Future of Less Work.
Hey, Nirit. So glad to be here. And we've known each other for, I think, almost 20 years now. But still, I'm going to ask you the first tough question. And my first question to you is, who is Nirit?
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's kind of odd because we do know each other for many years, but you're right. It's a good question. So I am passionate about the changing world of work. It's kind of interesting to see how something that started as work became a hobby and ended up being something I do. So I worked for Intel for almost 30 years in human resources and mergers and acquisitions, mostly in Israel, in Europe, in global capacity in Santa Clara. And sometime back in 2007, when the iPhone came out and the wireless started being more kind of prominent and the cloud infrastructure came into being, we started realizing that something really big was changing. And I asked, how are we going to feel at work in 2020, right? So for me, for many, many years, 2020 was the future before it knew it was going to become that. And so I started the first Future of Work project way back in 2010. The first white paper on the future of knowledge worker came out in 2011. And ever since then, I've been writing, researching, talking, and loving it on everything that has to do with how the world is changing, and then what does it mean for us as people, as individuals, as managers, as organizations and processes, and even big social systems like education.
So you've been doing a lot since in this year. So, but how does one become a thought leader on the future of work? It takes something, I think, to become such a thing.
Yeah, it's one of these things where you actually start realizing the difference between the way we described ourselves in the past, right? The title, the what did you study, so your profession, and the what's the job that you hold, the card to right now. And I think I realized over the years that if it doesn't stay with you when you move out of that job, that's not who you are,
Mm.
which was a really interesting idea for someone who's been with a single company doing a lot of really interesting jobs for many years. And you realize that you have to understand who you are. So what is the value you bring, and what are the skills and capabilities that you're building on every time, and what does that mean for the potential of who you can become? And so realizing that you don't have to necessarily be married to a single title, a single profession, or even something that people will understand. I remember when I started using the idea of the future of work back in 2010, people told me change the name. People don't understand what it means, right? So, and I think maybe that's what thought leadership is about. So you start talking about something that people don't know, they're not familiar with, they don't understand what it means. But over the years, you end up becoming mainstream, right? And so then I remember COVID came in, and I started talking about hybrid, and somebody told me, but nobody understands what that is. You need to change the terminology, and here we are with hybrid. So the future of less work, by the way I called this podcast is another one of those, right? So realizing that the next evolution of the future of work is different. And there are elements of less, and I actually call it the future of less question mark work, right? So it could be less because technology is going to change the way things are, maybe, take away our jobs, but maybe, hey, it's going to do things from we don't have to work as much. So there's a whole spectrum to be explored here and how work is changing. And Um, and so I think in thought leadership, and that's probably true for anyone today that's looking to, develop and evolve their own career, it's really not about the answers to yesterday's questions or problems. It's really about thinking through what are the questions we should be asking, and how do we co-create what needs to evolve and surface versus just repeat what already was.
And why is it so important to you? Do you have any kind of personal interest, or why you became so, I would say, maybe obsessed with this future of work?
Transforming the workplace and transforming work and opening up possibilities for people and really getting people to see that they're a lot more than their resume, and that they have so much that they can own, and that you don't have to be bound by what others allow you to either do or enter systems, and really helping organizations see that there's a different way to come together around work to get people motivated to the I call that the motivational paychecks. There's so much you can do today as an individual manager that's in your hands to get people to want to do what what's important to them. In fact, I strongly believe that people today, they do not work because you measure them on it or you tell them to, or it's their job or you pay them. Frankly, I think they work because it matters to them. And if you understand that, and you're able to tap into that and connect what matters to people to what you need to get done or what matters to you as a company, that's where you get real, value add for a win-win, frankly, for people and organizations. And so my passion is to get to that win-win for both the people and the organizations and how we build this next phase of work.
So you said it before that you've been writing columns for many years, including Forbes Today. You have this weekly newsletter that you send out, and you give talks all over the place. So why did you come to create the podcast now? What's your motivation behind this podcast?
First of all, I've been podcasting for many, many years, and I had a radio show for many years on high tech ecosystem. Conversations are very different. When I started writing in Forbes, I ended up talking to a lot of really interesting people in my research, and realized really quickly that these conversations need to go on mic, right? And so I decided that I wanted to create a more of a kind of a multi-platform content approach where I can talk to people on mic. And so I believe we co-create the future of work, and this one conversation at a time, one question at a time. So having these conversations with people on mic allows more people to hear the thought leaders, or just the thoughts, right? Or the questions, not necessarily the answers, the way that people grapple with different aspects of how world is changing and what we can think about doing. And so sharing those insights broader was very important for me. I think there's a lot of value to be heard from listening to people talk through these conversations and these thoughts. And then, of course, I use a lot of these in my research into columns in Forbes, and as we spread the word and how things are changing and what you can do about it. That's, to me, that's very, very valuable. It's part of that co-creation.
So you called this podcast "The Future of Less Work," and I want to talk about the less. So what's his prediction there?
you know, I think my very first column in the paper in 2015 referred to Charlie Chaplin's movie where, we brought machines into the factories, and the workers were afraid that the machines will, eat them up and take their jobs away. And we know that work has changed, but it enabled new industries, new roles, new evolution for people and organizations. It's very clear that the world of work is significantly transforming now. And it's not just technology that we're aware of, it's also the way people perceive their relationship with work and life, and how they want to live and work. So these big changes coming together, both what technology enables and also maybe challenges us to do, and then what people want to do and expect, that's going to lead, in my perspective, to very big transformations that don't look anything like the social contract of work that we were used to. So we thought of work for many, many years as a very clear structure, right? You learn a profession, you go work for a good employer, and sometimes out there in the future, there's going to be retirement. And this idea that you learn, you work, and then you play, that's evolving. And so we see people learn, unlearn, relearn, work a little, play a little, mix and match this thing. And we all know retirement's not going to look the same like it used to, a few years ago. When this social contract is changing, there are a lot of these conversations that we take for granted that will need to change. Even we talk a lot about AI and it's coming in to the workplace. And the old way of thinking about this is AI is a productivity tool. We can cut headcount and the same people will do more with less, which is what we've always done. And we see people pushing back and saying, wait a minute, if I can do more with less, I need to get some of that time back. Maybe I don't want to work as much. Maybe I want to work, less. And even the questions of what does less mean? So there used to be less work that had to do with, oh my God, the robots will take my work, right? I think there's also another version of less that's evolving right now that maybe the robots will take my job, right? And I can work less. And we're going to have to figure out, what does work mean?
Yeah,
How much, where, when, what, how, who, how much? All these questions, they're going to be different. And I don't even know if the answers will be fixed, right? Like things like 4-day work week is a fixed answer. We moved from 6 days to 5 days to 4. I'm not sure that's where we're going. It could be that, I want to work a lot right now and you want to do something else. And then next year it'll be completely reversed,
yeah.
right? So I think we have to talk about how this unbundling, fractionalization of work is affecting, how we approach work, and then what we need to do to make the systems work.
And it comes to me as you talk that maybe we also need to question the word itself, what work is. Because you said it yourself that, to you, what you're doing is not considered as work. You enjoy it, right? So,
Yeah, which is interesting because then we say, okay, work is something you have to do, right? And
right,
I read someone said once when we talked about work-life balance, right? This dichotomy of work and life is very sad because it means life begins when work ends.
right,
I don't think that's how it is anymore. And that's part of the different conversation is people say, no, work needs to be integrated in my life, not the other way around. It's not that I build my life in whatever's left over. So and again, that's just one aspect of it. So how do you make that work in organizations, right? What does it mean for leadership? What does it mean for success? What does it mean for motivation? There are a lot of really interesting questions there. The other aspect of it is the who, right? Who is the person doing the job, right? We used to think of ownership models that you are my employee, because it's my company, and then therefore I own you, right? I pay you by hour, which means I own your time. And if you finish your work, then I'll give you more work to do, right? So
right.
people are pushing back on that, and we have all these trends. We're calling them the quiet trends, right? Like quiet vacationing and quiet resignation, and they're not really quiet. They're people saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's like, I have a different contract I want to
Right.
create here between you and me. And I think that's part of this thing that we're trying to figure out, right? It's it's not you own me and my time, and it's not life begins when work ends. And it still needs to be win-win, right? So it still needs to be, organizations need to know how to deliver on their outcomes, which is a question, do you have to own your employees, or, do you bring the right person to the right job at the right time with the right skills and the right managers? And how do you make that happen if it's not the old way?
Yeah, even, if you talk even about the term, how we call it HR, human resources, so the whole resources thing is changing because I don't think
Absolutely.
people want to be called or considered as resources anymore.
Absolutely. I actually talk about people. I don't talk about human resources anymore. I think that's part of it. I think they're not your resources anymore. They're
Yeah.
people, and you need to engage their minds and hearts. And then how do you do that? And then who are the people that you're going to engage their minds and hearts? Do you have to own them, or is the right talent available to you in a different format? And we see this in the data, right? We clearly see that there are a lot of different ways people engage with work. And frankly, one of the funny things is you see the language is at loss, right? Because we have all these ways we call people. So what's the difference between a freelancer and an entrepreneur and, a gig economist? And it's like you have all these ways of people engaging with work, which is really some way of, I know how to do something you need it, and we're going to exchange value for, money somehow. And we see this in the macro data because we see growth without necessarily jobs. And so more and more people are creating these networks of value exchange in new ways. And organizations are still thinking about the ownership model, that for you to work for me, I need to own you. And frankly, I need to own you full time. And that's not going to work. So this fractionalization, this kind of system that's broken into its parts, and we're redefining every single piece of the part. So who are the people? What is the work? From jobs to tasks. What's the structure for work? From hierarchies to networks. From employees to just the right talent, from structures like office and hours of work to just let's understand how we measure and how we define success. How do we motivate? There's so much that needs to change here.
Yeah. So you've been in both sides of this conversation. You've been researching, speaking, writing about the trends over more than a decade now, but also in the same time you've been in senior leadership positions. You're sitting in this conference room where leadership struggles, or if how these changes are impacting us and impacting the organization are made. So how does this impact the perspective that you have?
So bridging, right, between the trends and between the changes and the real conversation that happens in these leadership conference rooms where, we talk about people, we talk about the challenges, we talk about the people processes, is what I do, simply because I can see both sides of the conversation. And so when I hear, RTO, return to office conversations, right? And we keep seeing people bring more and more data about why people want flexibility. And I look at these senior leaders and say that I know that they know this, right? These are really smart leaders, and they understand the megatrends. They've gotten to where they are because they understand megatrends and they can read the situation. So what is the real conversation here? And then, you can see that the real conversation isn't because they're not getting the data or they're not getting what people want. It's about, how do we manage an organization's move work forward, move strategy and innovation forward, engage people, create cultures this way? We don't know. And admitting we don't know is so important. And what we end up doing, right? Yeah, it's hard, right? And what we end up doing is we say, okay, let's go back to. The thing about back is not a direction you can take the future, right? There's no back to the future except in movies, right? So basically, you look at this and you say, okay, I get that it's hard. And sometimes I see on social media, or when I on my comments on my columns that I write, and I get people responding, and they're saying, okay, but all this dispersed thing isn't working because we don't know how to create culture. It's not working because we don't know how to create culture. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be learning how to create culture. And it's not necessarily because I stand for the idea that people need to work dispersed and remote. It's just that if you look at the mega trends and you look at the numbers, it's not just what people prefer how to do. It's also, how will you bring the right talent to work if you're not looking broad enough, right? How do you manage dispersed organizations? Because global is dispersed by definition. And when you look forward to where technology will come in and bring more and more sophisticated tools for us to feel like we're in the same time and space, although we're not, we're going to need to learn how to bring people together and engage them and connect them and build culture without them being in the same room. So it's not just about I people want to, right? It's just the way things are moving. And so you don't know how to do it. You're right. You don't know how to do it, but you need to learn, right? Which is back to why we need to be having these conversations.
And as you said, you probably the first thing is to admit that we don't know. And
Yes.
there's a common saying, and we heard it at Intel many times. Let's go back to basics, but the basics are changing, right? So we can.
Yeah, and that's why I basically I start every episode with a question. I ask the person, what's your piece of the puzzle that you're working on in this kind of bigger picture that is the future of work, and I end each episode with a question. What's the question we should be asking about the future of work? Because I think that's really important that we all understand that we're we're working on pieces and there's a lot more that we don't know.
So if you had to describe what is going on, so where are we on this whole future of work thing?
Um, First of all, I think that we see the speed of change doesn't allow us to imagine that it will go away, which for a long time we did, right? I think if I look back at 2010 to 2020, we could see a lot of unbundling going on. We could see everywhere becoming the new location and everything becoming the new work and everyone becoming the new talent. And yet, everyone in the system was just kind of my employees and 9 to 5 and offices um and then COVID hit, right? So that was the first wave. And then we started seeing, big technologies that you cannot ignore that are changing how things are and the rate of change and the speed, right? And people coming back from COVID where they basically looked at this and said, okay, I mean, life's short. And every day I come to work, it's the day of my life I'm trading. Is this how I want to live my life? And every time that people told us that we don't, we can't dream because this is how it is, this is the structure, you have to fit into the structure. COVID showed us that you don't, right? And so now people have possibilities and they have possibilities in the self-employment space. And we see this in the data and they have possibilities in the alternative kind of small job markets, right? I don't call that the gig economy because we can say, no, it's gigs, it's like
Yeah,
Uber drivers, and
not
it's
serious.
not. It's not. It's an exchange of work for value in a lot of different ways, and it goes all the way up the value chain, right? So people have alternatives. So the question isn't so much whether you think that your people can do the jobs in your organization the way in a different way. It's whether they have alternatives. And once you understand that they do, there's no choice but to move forward and asking, so how do I give them what they need? And this isn't, it's not a work from home conversation. It's not even just aware. It's a lot of other things. It's even, starts with what's the work and what are the motivators? And then, who are the people? Do you need to own them? And where does it need to happen? And how do you build cultures and trust and relationships? And is it the only way to do it if they're wearing your color badge, sitting in your office working, where you can see them? And the answers are no. And we know that the answers are no because we see in the macroeconomics a lot of growth happening in alternative modes of work. So people are learning and they're flexing their skills, and people learn faster than organizations who learn faster than systems, right? So basically, what's happening is more and more people are figuring it out, and organizations are built from people. So the more we let leaders or managers, frankly, within the organization do the right thing for the right person, right? Have more flexibility within the framework, right? The more organizations will figure out how to evolve and transform and what they need to allow and how they can make this work for whatever's right for them. And it's not getting a really great consultant and a white paper that will give you the answers, because that's not how things are right now. We're figuring them out, and what's right for you might be different than what's right for someone else. So, really learning the process, understanding the changes, understanding the why behind the changes, and then understanding what are the biggest elements of change that are relevant for you. That's what we need to be doing.
So the world of work has been changing for many years, and you know how do you see this is different from um, today's and the changes that organization went through before?
I think they're big changes. So
Bigger
we've
than before?
I think that we have first of all, there's a really healthy debate going on about whether we've always had, technology replace people and people finding new work, whether this is different or not. Like I said, I don't believe it's just technology. I also think it's people's expectations and social structures, which also changed, right? I mean, once upon a time we had children work and we no longer find that acceptable. Once upon a time people worked, long hours with no social benefits and we no longer find that acceptable. Once upon a time people worked 6 days a week, now they're working 5, right? So this idea that you have time for other things outside of work and that you get paid for that, and that it is not something that we've never had before. But you do have these peaks where things suddenly change, and you can see the big trends coming together, social trends, as well as technology, and it's just very clear that it's not going to go back to where it was pre-COVID, right? We already know that, and I think there's no reason to assume that you can just go back to the structure where you're an employee for a company working 9 to 5 in an office, and that's already clear. So what does that mean, right? How do you build the organization of the next phase? How do you build a career in the next phase? And how do these come together? That's what we're trying to figure out.
So if I'm trying to sit for now in the listener position, and if a leader is listening to us and now and he asks himself, okay, I understand that I need to do something now, but what would you tell him or her to do first?
I think that the first thing that we need to do is really stop being so decisive on this is what we're used to and this is how it worked, and therefore we must continue. And I also think that it's leaders in conference rooms will not solve this for the organization. I think that the more we're transparent and authentic and sharing the challenges, people are not stupid. They don't ask for what organizations can't give them. But we should be co-creating this. And we should be co-creating this in conversations that are, I call them diagonal, right? So from the very senior leader all the way down to the, RCG that started yesterday, or maybe even the intern. So if you bring the different voices from the different aspects of the organization, whatever those dimensions are in your organization, for a conversation on the biggest challenges that you're seeing right now. And also, we don't need to design the future of work. So we need to tackle is whatever is the biggest pain point right now. So if the biggest pain point is we can't seem to get a cohesive culture going, first of all, I'd ask, how do you know? Because sometimes it's because you're not comfortable not seeing people, the big empty office buildings. That's what gets you nervous. And so the question is there a problem with the culture, or is that the problem, right? So what is the problem exactly? Understanding what's the problem, making sure that you're clear on the problem. And then, yes, it is different to build a culture across people who are not physically in the same location. Frankly, it's not even a new problem. Every global organization has done this before, right? So if there's a lot of places you can learn, and a lot of places you can learn within your own organization. Every manager who managed a global dispersed team doesn't see their people every day in the office. They didn't in 2019 either, right? So as a leader, I'd say, okay, narrow down the biggest problem or two, bring in the right people in the room, and they're not the senior leadership in a conference room and co-create the solution, and then be open to not saying no to things that you need to say, okay, let me think about it. And yes, and right.
I think I understand what he's saying, but I think it could be hard for a leader to do that. Not necessarily they can do it because, as everyone and as also we have our own blind spots. So if I'll take your example about someone coming and seeing the building empty and saying we have a cultural problem. He truly believes this is a problem he's facing, and you need sometimes a different perspective to look at it from a different angle or to ask the right question.
I agree, and I'm not suggesting you don't bring in help.
Mhm.
I'm suggesting you don't bring in answers,
Mhm.
right? So there's a very big difference between bringing in people who can show you the black elephant in the room, which is, I love this term. It's like, for me, it's one of the things that are very happening right now. Is like you have black swans, but they're not really swans; they're elephants. They're there. We just choose not to see them, and so then we get surprised and we call them black swans. So, so you bringing in help. And I do this all the time, right? I walk into these sessions, and you've got this what I call the diagonal team, right? The young people all the way up to the senior leadership in the room, and they're working the processes, and the people, the room's telling you, right? It's telling you what the problems are, and it's telling you what they need to succeed, and it's always accurate for them, for the situation, for the organization. And so you need help to listen, right? So you need somebody who can listen to this and not push back automatically, or maybe not see that there's a conversation under the surface. But that's different than calling in somebody to give you the answers or the white paper or the benchmark that will tell you what to do. So I think that's the big difference in my mind. Is I'm not saying don't get external help to help you listen, but you need to process to hear what's right for your organization from your people and co-create, which is different than benchmark and somebody else did it before me and then I'll just go learn.
So maybe you talked about the black elephants. So what do you have any juicy black elephant that you've seen in one of these conference rooms in one of the organizations?
I mean, there's a lot of them. For example, I think organizations give first line managers a lot of leeway to make decisions on work. They could be even big financial impact decisions, right, on work. Then we give them zero leeway to make decisions on personalization for people, right? We call that exception, and we create big processes to stop that from happening, right? So that's very clear. People on the ground, managers on the ground know what they need to do at the right time for the right person in terms of whether it's solving problems, motivating, enabling, again, I call this the motivational paycheck. So all the aspects that cause people to um, engage and then want to come for you and then not leave, right? So a lot of this is in the hands of first line managers, but we don't give them the permission because we hold these things and we call them guidelines and we manage them from the top. And you cannot manage personalized motivational elements from the top. That's not going to work. That's another, one of these examples. There are a lot of examples. Even the conversation that we're moving from jobs and structures and hierarchies to skills and networks. The right person on the right work at the right time requires a lot of visibility and authenticity and the ability of the people to, we try to manage this, we manage from the top. You can't manage networks from the top. You need to enable them from the bottom, right? So we see organizations saying, okay, well, we want to build teams and we want to bring the right people in the teams, and then managers at the having no incentive to let the people move to something where it will be better for the person and the organization if they move there. But I own you. We're back to the ownership model. Right? You're mine, right? I hired you. I trained you. I own your time, so I'm not going to let you move. So there's a lot of black elephants.
So how about HR? If how HR should be prepared for these changes.
HR is in the middle of this, right? And it's really hard for us. For a long, long time, we had the answers, right? We had the guidelines. We could lead the conversations. We had data. There was time to generate, Rev 2005 of a presentation and bring it to leadership reviews. Um, and we got, like everybody else, thrown into this new environment with no decision making and no preparation. And we're trying to, figure out how to swim with these rising tides and get the right answers because that's what we were being asked to do. So I think we're in a frustrating position because we talk about everything or we own everything that's changing, and they're looking to us, the leadership's looking to us to give them the answers, which we don't have, right? So HR needs to get really good at understanding why we can't work the old way, right? Why people are not resources, why the way the work, the managers, the processes, the even the type of people we employ, why everything's changing, so we can explain why the requests we're getting are not possible, right? And once we are able to do that, we can say, and here's what we are offering you to do.
And if I'm an individual manager and I see that my organization is not really focused on how the work is changing, well, and so there's no discussion, not in leadership, not in HR, but I see it. Okay, maybe I'm listening to this podcast, maybe I read something about that, and I understand the world is changing, and I also I'm the nearest one to the people, so I
Yeah.
see what's happening, right? So probably in my position, I'm the first one to see the changes before leadership and HR are seeing it. So what can I do in this position?
Yeah, I do think that I think direct managers have a lot of power today. And if I go back to this idea of the motivational paycheck, what motivates people, a lot of that, you don't need the system to make that happen, right? Ultimately, people's relationship with the bigger organization is the millions of micro moments that are really their relationship with you and the direct people that they come in contact with. And then as a manager, everything you say and do, and then everything you don't say and you don't do, right? That crafts those moments. And people end up remembering the good moments, like the small ones, like, somebody said good job, and the big ones, like I got promoted. And they remember the bad moments, right? Somebody yelled at me or spoke, inappropriately in a meeting, or like the bigger bad ones, like I didn't get the job I wanted. And so thinking about these moments, right? And how do you motivate the people and what they need? And the motivational paycheck, it's things like development and seeing the person for who they are, which isn't always, saying nice things about them, but it is authentically having a conversation on, what do I understanding what they need and what matters to them. And if they could choose what they would do, what would they be doing right now? And can you help them with this win-win contract, right? Fulfill their needs in their careers and their passion in their lives while they're working with and for you, right? And so really having these conversations and helping people network and helping them grow and helping them um, become relevant or stay relevant in the market, and making time for skills and evolution, right? Not just what they're doing today, but what they want to be doing tomorrow. And if when you understand the answers to all those questions, you're able to link people with work. And remember that jobs are not, they're not set in stone. They're just tasks we put together in org charts, right? You can unbundle jobs into tasks and hand them out in a new way instead of just giving somebody something because it's their job. To ask who would benefit from doing this task, right? And give it to them because it's the right thing for them and they can grow, or it challenges them, or it's the right fit.
So you have kids, right? And what do you advise them? Like how should they prepare themselves for this new world of work?
So I tell them that the jobs that they'll work in haven't been created yet. And so it really doesn't matter what they call themselves. That the only thing that matters is that they build their skills and capabilities. and understand that those skills and capabilities will, some of them they're going to have to. I mean, I'm good at a lot of things nobody needs anymore. So understanding that you need to learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? The
Maybe
relevance. Sorry.
also maybe another change is that you see here is moving from knowledge is important to skill is more important than knowledge.
Yeah, in fact, I would say what's more important than knowledge today is who you know that knows, right?
Hmm.
So broadening your network kind of circles of people, right? Not just the people you work with, which I call the operational network, but also a strategic network. So the people that will show you what others are calling the things you're good at, right? So I talk to people about the fact that a lot of the next opportunities in your career begin in a conversation in a room. You're not there, and people are talking about a challenge or an opportunity, and they're asking who we know that can do this, right? And we don't know each other's resumes. What we do is we think through these images of people left behind on what they're good at. So I'd say, okay, I'm going to call this person because they always have tough questions and I need this right now. Or I'm going to call that person because they know how to lead a multidisciplinary team. So I think about this, and so the more people know about you and the value that you bring, and the more you know about what they're calling that, right, in different places, what they call the things that you know how to do and that you'd want to do and you'd want your name to come up, right? The more people know about you, the more likely your name will come up and they'll approach you. And then the next thing that happens is they approach you with things that don't look like the things they're used to. And some of us would automatically say, oh no, I don't do that, right? And I always say, okay, if you want to say no to an opportunity that shows up at your door, somebody brought it to your door because they think that it is a fit with what they know that you do, right? It might be called something else. It might look like something you're used to. And so if you want to say no, say, let me get back to you and think about it. And you're very likely to realize that you know how to do this. It just doesn't look and feel like what you're used to. And that's how you build your own career and evolution from these narrow jobs and titles to a broader, what's the value I bring? Who can I collaborate with? Who needs what I know how to do? What do they call it? And how will they know I exist?
Now it brings to my mind a story I heard in the past about Henry Ford, and I'm talking about maybe 1930s, something like that. And one of the newspapers wrote an article and wrote in this article that Henry Ford was an ignorant, and he took them to court. He sued them, the newspaper. And in the trial, the attorney from the paper tried to show that Ford is an ignorant. So he started asking many questions like, who was the seventh president of the US, or how many soldiers died in such and such war, and all this type of questions. And Henry Ford stopped him and said, I don't know the answers to all of these questions, but what I do know that on my desk I have this box with 8 different buttons, and I can press any one of these buttons, and the minute I press this button, a person that knows the answers will get into my room. So I think this is exactly, it's the question about who
Fabulous.
you know that knows. You said before that you always end up your interviews with a question, for a question instead of an answer. So I want to ask you the same thing and the same question. So what is the one key question you think we should be all asking about the future of work?
I think that every time a problem surfaces and our automatic response is to try to bring in the what we know how to solve it, we should be asking ourselves, what do I don't know that I know, right? We talk a lot about what do I don't know that I don't know, right? Which is all this blind spots. But I actually worry these days more about what do I don't know that I know. So my automatic response is that I automatically have the answer to, and I'm not even realizing that what I should be doing right now is stopping and checking before I give the answer. So that I think is going to be really helpful if we learn to pause and not assume that what brought us here will get us to the next phase, and then ask, how do I build, process, question, meeting, team, or hand this over to someone who will make sure that we're not just repeating the past versus creating the future.
Yeah. Wow. It's been really fascinating. And I know the next episode is also going to be very, very interesting and very thoughtful, and maybe raising the questions that people need to ask themselves, that leaders need to ask themselves, HR and managers need to ask themselves. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Eran. Thank you for hosting my first episode. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share, my passion and why I do what I do. And join us. And then if you have ideas of people we should be talking to, you know how to find me.